Hello everybody, it's Kristi Blakeway, and I am back as your guest host on Planet Holistic. Thanks so much for having me back. Today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about happiness, something that we all strive for. When I'm not busy writing, I have another passion. I'm also an educator. I've worked in schools for just over 20 years, from kindergarten to grade 12, and I'm currently a principal of a kindergarten to grade 7 school. One of the things I love to do as an educator is help other teachers figure out how to help kids find their happiness. And so I've had the pleasure of presenting workshops on happiness in our school district, as well as in British Columbia, different provinces in Canada, also in the United States and Mexico. So usually if I present a workshop on happiness and the science behind it and what truly makes us happy, it takes about 2 hours. But for this podcast, we have a little less time, so I'll probably spend between 10 and 15 minutes with you and just go over some of the key things that I talk about in a workshop. And I hope by the end of our podcast, you're feeling even happier than you are right now. So let's get started. So first, I would like to start by asking you a question. Pause with whatever you're doing and think about what would make you happier in this exact moment. So what would it be that you would need to feel even happier than you do right now? Now, obviously, I can't ask for your answers, so hold on to them for a second. I'm willing to bet that some of you out there thought of some of the common things that I often hear in workshops. So perhaps you thought of a winning lottery ticket, maybe a vacation, maybe something simple like a daily pick-me-up like a latte or some chocolate, or maybe a bottle of wine. Lots of times when we ask people, what do you need to feel happier? We think of something that will give us immediate gratification. Sometimes it's shopping, buying a new pair of shoes and getting that high that comes from something new. I'd like to ask you another question now. I'd like you to take a few seconds and pause and think back to your happiest memory. Perhaps you're thinking back to a special occasion. Often when people think of their happiest memory, they think of birth, celebrations, weddings, time with friends, a special vacation. Think about what it is for you that brought the most joy and happiness into your life. And if you were to relive that day, what was it that day that brought so much happiness? Now, I'm willing to bet, because I've seen this many times in the workshops that I offer, is that there is a disconnect between those two answers. So when we ask ourselves, what do we need to be happier? For some reason, we don't link it with what's brought us happiness in the past. We go to quick fixes like buying something for ourselves, or thinking that extra money would bring us happiness. And yet, when you think of your happiest memories, it's very different. It's not the day that you got paid a little bit more, or you probably don't think back to a day in 2015 when you had a great latte. Those things pass, the new shoes wear out, and it doesn't stick with us as a lasting memory. And so I want you to pay attention to that disconnect as we talk about the science of happiness and where it actually comes from. So this time, and last question, I promise, this time I want you to think of the happiest person you know. And what is it about that person that makes them so happy? So for me, I actually wrote about the happiest person I know. His name's Stephen. He's a friend of mine who I met in grade 8 when I was in high school, and he invited me to sit and have lunch with him. And Stephen has autism. And so he's lived his whole life with challenges and struggles that he faces. He can't drive a car. There's many things that he won't be able to do that you and I probably get to. And yet, he has the most positive mindset and really, truly thrives on human connection and seeing the good in every person he meets. So I wrote about Stephen in the Inspiration book that comes out August 6th. So think about the person you chose. What is it that makes them so happy? Is it someone where life was easy, or they won the lottery? Or did they have their struggles? And I find when I ask this question, people recognize that often the happiest people have gone through a certain amount of adversity, or even if they haven't had crazy things happen to them, it's people who really choose to have a positive outlook despite what happens to them. So over the next few minutes, I want to share a little bit about the science of happiness. And there's a million books on happiness now in the self-help section. One of my favorite scientists who started one of the leaders in the study of happiness is Shawn Achor. You might be familiar. He wrote the book, The Happiness Advantage, and he also has a great TEDx talk that talks about some of the tips. And so he studied where happiness comes from. So imagine a pie chart. If you look at the graph, 50%, half of the pie chart, comes from our genetics. So there's nothing you can do about it. And this is just the way you were born. And people are born with different levels of happiness. When I offer a workshop, I always ask people to think, if they're a parent, I ask them to think about their children. Or if they grew up with siblings, I ask them to think about their siblings. Or if not, just to think about your friend group or colleagues. Without naming them, if I ask you to pick one of those categories and choose who's the happiest person, everybody puts their hand up that they can do it. I know, for example, I have 2 boys. Love them both dearly. They're wonderful kids. They are a little bit different in how they view the world from a positive lens. And I like to use this example. 5 years ago, when I turned 40, my husband surprised me that morning. We were in Oregon, and he surprised me and let me know that the 2 of us were going to go up on a helicopter and see the Oregon coast. And I was really excited. My parents were there with us, so they were able to babysit our children. And so we went and we told our 2 boys, you're going to stay with your grandparents for a few hours. We won't be long. We're going on a helicopter ride. Well, my one son, Cole, who would have been 7 at the time, I don't even know if he heard us. It didn't faze him at all. He was like, okay, see you later. Well, my son, Jaden, who likes to think things through first, he would have been 9 at the time. When we said, Mom and Dad are leaving, we're going to go up on a helicopter, his mind said to him, Mom and Dad are going to die today and they're not going to come back. There was sheer panic on his face. The thought of us going up in the sky and leaving him was like devastating for him. So much so that we didn't get out the door that day. We rescheduled for the following day. And somehow he did enough negotiating with us that the deal was, okay, go up in the helicopter, but I have to be able to watch. I have to be able to see you. In fact, I'd really like to be with you in case something happens. We can still be together as a family. So somehow we ended up going, the 4 of us, on the helicopter ride the following day. And I have pictures of that moment. And although they were both beaming and happy with it and love it, once they had the experience, the pictures as we started to take off are hilarious. Cole is sitting up with the pilot and he's just smiling ear to ear. Jaden is in the back of the helicopter with sheer panic on his face. And it's just who they are. They're both happy kids, but they process information differently. Cole goes to the positive right away. Jaden needs to think it through, make sure it's safe before he can see the joy in it. So our genetics do that. That's 50%. It's who we are. You can't shift it. Maybe you got your mom's happy genes and your brother got your dad's not so happy genes. Who knows? The other part that we cannot control is the other 10%, or is the next 10% of the pie. 10% comes from the things that happen to us. So if you win the lottery, or if you're in a major car crash, you would think that those highs and lows would really impact our happiness. But 6 months later, we find out that it hasn't adjusted it any more than 10%. So we don't have control over it, but the good news is it doesn't shift our happiness up or down by more than 10%. So the great news of this pie chart is that we have 40% left. That other 40% of our happiness is from our thoughts and actions. So we control it. Shawn Achor came up with 6 tips on how to control your mind to really gain that benefit. The first one is gratitude. And there's many ways to practice gratitude, whether it's saying thank you to people intentionally, whether you use an app, there's many gratitude apps or gratitude journals, or even if it's just at the beginning and end of your day, taking time to train your mind to think about what you're grateful for. The habit of doing that helps retrain the way you see the world because you begin to look for what you're grateful for so that you can answer your own question. I love the quote, "Energy flows where attention goes." So what we focus on is what we focus on. The next one that Shawn Achor suggests is called the doubler. And this is a simple activity that invites you to relive your positive experience. So if you had a great day, write it down. Ask yourself the best thing that happened in the last 24 hours and either tell someone about it or write it down. Fun 15. Think about what you love doing and make sure you do something you love for at least 15 minutes each day. It might be gardening, it might be scrolling through Facebook, it might be exercise, but pick something for you at least 15 minutes a day. Meditation. And some people are uncomfortable with this word. It doesn't mean that you need to become a Buddhist monk. It means that you need to be mindful. So taking time each day, even to sit in silence. It could be when you're driving your car. It could be in the shower to try and just clear your mind and focus on your breathing and just be really present. And the last tip he has is on connections. That so much of our joy comes from those memories we talked about, were those connections with people. So be intentional about who you spend your time with. What circle do you have around you, and how much do you take time to connect with the people that you truly care about? Who do you have fun with? Be intentional about what you do with your time. So those were Shawn Achor's tips. I'll add a few more of my own. One thing I like to do is I like to write letters to myself whenever I have a big day coming up. So for example, on my wedding, it was years ago now, but I knew I'd be nervous. I knew I'd be excited, but I wanted to be present. And so I wrote myself a letter in advance. That morning I opened it up and I read it as my way of setting the tone for the day. So when you have a day ahead that you think you might feel nervous or anxious or sad, write yourself a letter when you're in a good headspace before that and have it ready to help guide yourself through that day. Social media. We have a choice every day with social media, whether we have the ripple effect and spread positivity. I love the Inspirations Facebook group. It's exactly for that. It spreads daily happiness. Or we have the choice to be negative and see that ripple effect. So choose to be positive. I love to exercise. Just the endorphins that are released are very similar to that of an antidepressant. And so that boost to our mind helps with our own happiness. And the last thing that I like to do is I like to talk to strangers. I've just written my first book called Beyond Hello that comes out this fall. And in the book, I talk about the value of connecting with people we don't know and learning about their lives, learning about new experiences, and just having genuine human conversation where we connect on a soulful level. I like to take people who are homeless for lunch and hear about their life stories. I know that's outside many people's comfort zones, but do something that brings you joy. So I hope the tips I've shared on happiness have been helpful for you. I'd like to say thank you to Todd for once again inviting me to be a guest host on Planet Holistic. Thanks so much for tuning in. We're out of time, but I wish you all the best, and I hope some of these tips left you feeling a little bit happier. Thank you.